Looking for news, information about frequent flyer programs, you've come to the right place. This is the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I are so happy you're here. In the pregame, we were talking a lot about Sky Club and American Airlines. Sean flies American Airlines. Y'all, during the Q&A, please raise that with him. Ask him why. Thank you for joining. This is the morning meeting, a different kind of experience where we'll run through the day's events with peace, love, and understanding. And then we're going to kick it around. And then again, the O. Henry twist. We take your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. Not this hand, but the yellow one, the one that doesn't move and looks like a like a stained catcher's mitt. If you're watching on two-way on YouTube or X, don't raise your hand. Go in the chat, but no smack in the chat. Thank you very much. Today, gentlemen, Sean, one can't help but notice that you either have an extremely realistic fake background or you're poolside.
Yeah. I'm at Shawnalago.
Yeah.
It's my new winter retreat. You can see some of the help in the back getting my pool toys ready for the post morning meeting.
I like what you've done in terms. I like what you've done in terms of the shrubbery.
Yeah. It's been an expensive winter, which is why I flew down to see how the team has been doing. I'm very pleased with the work.
It's a nice, modest pool too. It's nice.
You know what? I try. I work hard. I try.
In college, I was described as having a bookish tan, and I think you look fantastic. And you're basically sun-kissed.
Well, I have the cabana over me. You know how that is.
All right. Today, another eventful day ahead of us. The biggest news for many of you is the president's threatening to slap 200% tariffs on European wine. So start brushing up on your Napa Valley options, because those will be more affordable if this happens.
I will tell you, Mark, I'm literally here at the meeting, the National Pork Producer Council. And that was obviously the topic du jour this morning. And these retaliatory tariffs were literally obviously what they were focused on because of this. Like, these guys from Europe and Canada know exactly where to hit our folks. Wine, liquor, pork, ag products. It's actually very interesting how it's affecting our industry.
I don't really understand why the pork producers would be meeting in Orlando and not Cedar Rapids, but
good question. I asked. They switch, so they go Midwest and then warm. So it's warm Midwest, and this is, thank God, the warm year.
Matt Pena, have you ever raised your hand before on this program? Or are you new? Matt, raise your hand. Raise your physical hand if you're new, Matt. No, Matt is not new. Matt's been here many times before. All right. We need 3 new people today. That's our new standard. So if you've never raised your hand before, please do. All right. President of the United States today, put up 101, please. Has a relatively limited schedule. Meeting with the Secretary General of NATO. There's pool coverage of that, so that'll probably turn into a press conference. And then they've got a working lunch. There's no press conference scheduled, but again, that photo op will probably turn into a press conference. And the General Secretary of NATO, or pardon me, the Secretary General of NATO has been pretty Trumpy in describing what NATO needs to do, what the member countries need to do, the mission. So this, if in all likelihood, will be more of a love fest than a confrontation.
Although it'll be interesting, Mark, about Russia rejecting the ceasefire and how Trump handles that.
Yeah, that'll obviously be a topic of discussion. Here's the pool for today, 102, please. Sean, what is Just the News?
Just the News is an outlet founded by John Solomon, former AP reporter, obviously very right-leaning. He has a partnership of some sort with Real America's Voice, but he does a lot of investigative reporting. They actually have a White House correspondent now as well. So, but that's who it is and what it covers.
Yeah. All right. Nothing else on there particularly unusual. All right. Let's go to our topics of the day after more on the schedule. Vice President, no idea what he's doing. It's a home and away day for Canada and the U.S. Away, Marco Rubio is meeting with the foreign ministers of the G7 countries in anticipation of the full G7, which is in Canada this year by happenstance, which will be interesting. When is the G7? Does anybody know when the actual heads of state meet? Is that in September?
It should be soon. So you usually do it, 6 weeks or so ahead. So
all right. So that's coming up in Canada. So Rubio's up there today. He's got a bunch of meetings. And then in Washington, Secretary Lutnick and the USTR Chief Greer are meeting with a couple of the four, I think the finance minister, one other minister, and then the premier of Ontario, Mr. Doug Ford, who, of course, has had large prominence in the back and forth over tariffs and has become kind of the symbol of both defiance and the search for reconciliation and cooperation. So we'll watch those. House is out. Democrats, once again, continue their meeting in Leesburg, Virginia. Tonight, closed doors, as Dan pointed out yesterday, I believe. They're hearing from Governors Whitmer, Shapiro, and Beshear, three people often discussed as potential presidential candidates. That's closed press at 7:30. Earlier today, the Senate is in as Democrats grapple with the strategy to try to figure out how not to be blamed for shutting down the government by the press and the public and the Republicans, at the same time not being accused by their base of caving to Donald Trump. They're meeting at around noon, around 1 over lunch, once again, third or so meeting to talk about this. And at 2 o'clock, some Republican senators, don't know who, are meeting with the president at the White House to strategize about the legislative agenda. So first up, Dan continues to believe that he and Sean will be correct, that eventually the Democrats will vote for cloture, if not final passage, and the House bill will pass the Senate tomorrow, maybe Saturday, whatever. Dan, do you still think that Democrats will get some fig leaf from a very seemingly conciliatory John Thune and find their way to finding enough votes to get this to the floor?
Yes, I do. They're going to fold, and I get why they are trying to show the base that they're doing something. But to me, this is almost idiotic because they're just getting pummeled by the right and by, some people in the middle when everyone knows that they're going to end up folding and they're not going to stop this. So I think what they'll do is Thune's going to let them have a vote on the floor for what's called a clean CR, which would mean that literally the budget as it is today would be the same budget, tomorrow, so to speak. There would be no changes. So
for 30 days. For 30 days.
For 30 days, it's clean, so to speak. That will fail. They won't even get a majority of the vote. Then they will put the continuing resolution that came from the House on the floor to file what's called cloture, meaning that we're going to end debate and put this up for a vote. There will be at least 8 Democrats that will agree to that. I was surprised that Hickenlooper and Warner both came out yesterday and said they would not vote for that. I did find that a little bit curious, at least Mark Warner. Hickenlooper's up in 2026.
So Dan, just for the sake of argument, name 8. Fetterman plus what, 7?
So I think Warnock, Ossoff, the 2 Arizona senators, Kane, Baldwin, Slotkin, and maybe Shaheen now because she's not running. Like it'll be somebody
that
who's
gets
retiring.
you that's 9, so you're good.
Yeah, I think they'll do. If you shut down the government, I asked this on X like a week ago. I don't know what your get is. Like I know, Mark, in theory, it's that Trump rescinds some of DOGE or agrees that what is in this current appropriations bill, they will carry forward and spend the money appropriately. He's never going to do that. And the House is not going to agree to it. So I just...
Yeah. Dan, Sean, Dan said this was almost idiotic. Most Republicans I know think it's simply idiotic.
Well, just let's go back to the timing. The House is out. There's no, they left for a reason to jam the Senate. So the government closes Friday night, just so we're clear, at midnight. The House passed the bill. And then I know everybody was like, oh my God, the House is out. They did that for a reason, which was that you jam those guys and you say, hey, we're not here. If you don't pass our bill, the government shuts down. That's a fact. Now you can call it what you will tactically, but the bottom line is unless the Senate passes the identical bill, the government shuts down. So this is why they did what they did. And I think that, yes, they might throw a fig leaf or whatever we want to call it to make them feel better. But at the end of the day, I don't think that enough Democrats, because the best case scenario, you could call the House back in, but they're not going to do it. They're going to make the Senate walk the plank on this.
The one thing that I think is not discussed enough, and I know you both know this, is the base. The senators would all vote for this in a heartbeat, the Democratic senators. It's the fact that the base, given voice, not just by the squad, but by the so-called groups, are just saying, you must do something. And the smart Democratic senators are saying, well, game it out for us. Tell us what it is. It would happen. That would be good for our side if we don't get this to the floor. And they don't have an answer. But you can't, I think, blithely disregard their frustration because
Right.
because letting this pass is giving sanction, in their view, to Doge.
Right. But the problem, Mark, is to have this this conversation should have been happening a month ago.
Correct.
But instead, the base, the steam built in the kettle. It built, and now it's kind of starting to squeal out that the base is like, you have to do something. But I mean, I talked to one person last night who was like, we're not going to die on the Hill for the bureaucracy right now. Like, if there was one department that you said, okay, like national security or the veterans department, like we want this cut. The problem is the base wants them to dig in on the entire bureaucracy.
Correct.
And that is a very dangerous thing politically to do.
One of the things the Democratic senators continue to discuss is, before they wave the white flag, and I got to say, Thune is being awfully accommodating to them stylistically, is where can we tell the base we're going to win? Where's our legislative win? So, Sean, what's the answer to that? If you look ahead to the rest of the year, where can Democrats win on the Hill?
I think part of this is, if you're Schumer, you just want to punt, meaning give them something to look forward to. Maybe it's the debt ceiling and say, hey, we're going to get something out of this. But I agree with Dan. I mean, do you really want to be defending the status quo right now and saying, hey, we're going to keep Doge? Like, we're going to fight for this? You're fighting for, I mean, I get you could be nuanced on it, but that's not how it's going to be portrayed. I also think, just to your point about Thune being accommodating, he's got to watch his six, because if I were John Thune, I'd be careful from a MAGA world standpoint that you don't look too accommodating.
I
agree.
I don't know I was surprised.
Yeah. I would say this. I think that they got to give him something, throw out debt ceiling or something where we can say this is what we fight for. But Schumer, to Dan's point, has to be careful, because if he doesn't pick somewhere that is realistic, they're going to, at some point, this is the problem with the House guys when they, bucked Hakeem Jeffries leading up to the joint address, when they didn't feel like there was a plan. And they said, if you don't have one, then we're doing mine.
Right. Dan, where can Schumer and Jeffries tell the base they're going to get a win?
I mean, look, the only place that I think this conversation could be had potentially is if they do a debt ceiling vote, like a clean debt ceiling vote, where they're going to need Democrats. Like, they are going to have to come to them.
But what's the win?
I mean, that's it. And I think the party has not prioritized amongst the shock and awe. They have not picked, 2 or 3 topics, whether it's within Doge or on immigration or on tax. Like, the party has not had that narrowing of the funnel of the mind to say, these are what we really want to try. We want to get something. The base is just saying, stop everything. And that's just not realistic. So I think, Mark, we need to narrow our focus and then define what that is for the base.
So here's a potential fight for the Democrats. For the last 25 years, if you look at public opinion polling, you'd think that a pro-environmental position was very popular. Democrats have failed to mobilize on that issue repeatedly at the ballot box. And Republicans have come back on the economy and said, if you wanted to, we're going to take your car away, your dishwasher away, et cetera. So I've been watching Doge very carefully, and I see people being fired, and I see some programs being canceled. But I haven't seen, until yesterday, anything as fundamental as this, which is Lee Zeldin, a relatively moderate Republican from New York, did a video announcing the new mission of the EPA, which makes it sound like he's the Secretary of Commerce. Here is Lee Zeldin explaining the new mission of his new EPA. Roll tape, please.
Today, I'm pleased to make the largest deregulatory announcement in U.S. history. Today, the Green New Scam ends, as the EPA does its part to usher in the golden age of American success. Our actions will lower the cost of living by making it more affordable to purchase a car, heat your home, and operate a business. Jobs will be created, especially in the U.S. auto industry, and our nation will become stronger for it. From the campaign trail to day one and beyond, President Trump has delivered on his promise to unleash energy dominance and lower the cost of living. We at EPA will do our part to power the great American comeback.
Sean, am I right that this is a big deal, and what are the implications going forward politically and substantively?
This is huge. This is kind of like OMB in the sense that people on the outside don't fully appreciate the power that it wields. One of the great success stories that Trump used to talk about during the first term was Scott Pruitt, who had been the EPA administrator at the time, and how he was deregulating things, just not getting the attention. And I think the difference is Lee is obviously a lot more TV friendly, a lot more political. This is huge for the movement. The idea of all of these regulations, especially in the small business world, who have been strangled by ridiculous environmental things that do more to virtue signal than actually protect the environment. So this is a huge thing for business, probably big business and small business as well. But this is a huge conservative win for the movement.
Sean.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan, sorry.
Yeah. Look, I think he sounded more like the Secretary of Energy. And I think substantively, I think it's terrible because you're talking about clean air and mercury in water and things of that nature. Politically, and this is why, Mark, I think the Democrats are going to have to be careful. I worked for one of my clients years ago was a governor of a Midwestern state and also a Rocky Mountain state, and they both wanted to focus on the environment. But when they got back the data, both qualitative and quantitative, the idea of paying more for energy, for food, for heating, for their car, versus it will make the air cleaner or the car more environmentally friendly. The polling was like 70-30 against the environmental action when put in that context. And I think coming off of inflation with tariffs and DOGE and all the economic anxieties, if we start, trying to die on the hill for the EPA, I think it's dangerous. But personally, I mean, for the country, I think it's terrible.
Yep. Raise your hand if you want to get in the conversation. Again, we need 3 new people or the show will be eliminated. I've seen so much wasted polling money, so much money wasted on polling in the last 25 years by pro-environmental groups who are trying to convince their clients and their members that it's a winning issue for them. And as Dan just said, if you poll it honestly, it's not, which is why Zeldin is so confident in doing this, which is why Republicans talk about, taking their car away, taking the dishwasher away. Of course, the country needs a balance. And what Zeldin's saying seems to me, both politically and substantively, if you take it literally, it's too much. For it's not sensible what he's saying. The EPA can't be in charge of making things affordable. In fact, the founding language.
See, I disagree with that though. But I mean, I think for a lot of small businesses, they struggle with trying to get by to.
But that's not the EPA's. Of course.
No. I disagree. I think the way that companies have to comply with like the tsetse fly regulation because Sean,
I'm not disagreeing with you about that at all. And as a matter of substance or politics, what I'm saying is he's not even giving lip service. I mean, eliminate the EPA. If the EPA's mission is not to have some guidance about finding the right balance, we don't need the EPA. Let the Commerce Department decide what the right balance is. I just don't understand it from an institutional point of view. We don't need the EPA. If his posture is we're just about making sure people can drive whatever car they want and to make sure business does not have any regulation based on environmental concerns, get rid of it.
Yeah, and that energy is as cheap as humanly possible. And I mean, look, this is where DOGE we're going to see. You eliminate the Department of Education. That's where they're trying to go. You basically turn the EPA into a subsidiary of the Energy Department. I don't know if that middle 10% signed up for that. And it's a real outstanding question.
Barack Obama would win that argument.
Yes.
Barack Obama would win that argument.
But there's a difference between the Department of Education has taken what is ostensibly a state and local issue and tried to federalize it. We talked to that superintendent in Montana a couple of weeks ago on the show. That's different. The problem, so I don't have, I mean, again, conservatives have long argued since its foundation. Reagan talked about this back in the day. Getting rid of this thing because it's not what it was supposed to do. The EPA, I think, is different in the sense that, there is agreement on clean water, clean air, but where it's crossed the line is that it's now become, it's worked its way into every small business where it talks about, how far away you have to be from a water source and talking about ponds and things that literally are not about, that are inhibiting growth and job creation at the expense of virtue signaling.
But that's not the EPA's job to be a job creator. Their job is to find the balance.
But it's not to stop. It's to protect the environment, not inhibit job creation.
But Sean, if he said there's a new day dawning, the balance between economic growth and affordable energy and the environment has gone askew. We've veered too far into irrational regulation that have hurt business development, have hurt consumers. We're striking a new balance. Of course, we all want clean water and clean air, and of course, there's a role for the federal government in that. But the balance has to shift, and that's what we're doing today. But that's not what he said. What he said is we're getting rid of all the regulation because we want you to be able to have clean, cheap energy. I don't want to pay for. I don't want my tax dollars to go for an EPA that's a subsidiary of, I'd say, the Commerce Department. Dave says the Energy Department. I don't think either of us disagrees with you. The regulation has gone too far, and it's hampering economic growth. But you can't say that statement represented the search for new balance. It was like we're getting rid of all these regulations.
It's a big issue with suburban women too. At least it has been the last couple of elections. So we'll see.
All right. Marco Rubio already had his meeting, I see, with JD Vance is on the Ingram angle tonight. That's what he's doing today. Think that'll be live or taped? I bet it's taped.
I bet recorded.
It's taped. All right. 100%. All right. Hopefully there'll be a soundbite before my evening program. All right. Either of you want to say anything about tariffs? As you know, my policy, I don't like to cover every day's fake rises and falls because it's all just going to change tomorrow. But anything besides the 200% tariffs on European wine, either of you would like to discuss?
Yeah. Well, I would just say we talked about that Oval Office meeting. I think that obviously NATO is going to be a focus, but when you're talking like that's the meeting with the Secretary General, I think, we've now seen, I think Zelensky gave us, I wouldn't say a roadmap because I think that we don't want necessarily that to happen every time, but a warning that every time one of these things happens, these bilats in the Oval Office, that there's the potential that this thing could go crazy. And yes, he is a conservative former leader of Holland, so that there's sort of a personal connection there maybe. But they're going to be talking about this. This is literally from an industry standpoint, every major industry in America is now weighing in on this. And the retaliatory piece of this, which we're now seeing in the last 24 hours, is having a massive effect. These guys aren't stupid. I mean, when it comes to the Europeans, they know what they're doing. They're going after products and states where Trump voters are going to be the most effective. And so I have a feeling that this is definitely going to be an issue that comes up today beyond NATO.
Yeah, the only thing I would just add is in the first month, most of Trump's threats, the country being threatened, Colombia, Panama, the fentanyl with Canada and Mexico, Trump quickly kind of got out or they backed down, right? Or some combo. For the first time now, and I think we'll see more of this, you are seeing Canada and the EU saying, okay, you want to play this game? Here we go. And to Sean's point, we're going to do it surgically and targeted to exact pain. And now we're going to see, because Trump kind of freaked out about Canada potentially cutting off energy to Michigan, Minnesota, and upstate New York, which, okay, we rely on their energy for those areas. So we're going to see now what happens when somebody kind of potentially punches the bully back. What does Trump do?
Yep. All right.
Well, by the way, Dan, I will say this. The thing about the energy thing is everything that I read, when Doug Ford threatened to do that to those three states, I'm no energy expert, but my understanding was that they don't actually supply that much. And I thought that it was an interesting response because was it the effect, like the media effect of it, like that it could potentially do that, or was there more to it? But I actually thought that it was interesting that they took them that seriously if they really don't affect those three states in the way that they do.
Three things before we get to our last topic, which is Pete Buttigieg and his apparent decision not to run for Senate as he focuses on 28. Number one, I see a lot of hands up. As best I can tell, every hand up is someone who's previously asked a question on this program. It's an irony because you all love the show and you love asking questions and we love having you. But if three new people don't raise their hands, the irony is you all will lose your program. So please, if you've never asked a question, I can tell you it's very nice to ask a question. Nothing bad will happen to you. So please raise your hand. Three new people today. In addition to what Dan mentioned about Putin and a ceasefire, there are widespread reports that Russia is on the march today in Ukraine and gaining ground. We'll watch that. Dave Weldon, former congressman from Florida, was nominated to run the CDC, and it was supposed to have his confirmation hearing today. It was withdrawn, several news organizations are reporting, because of his concerns about his longtime vaccine criticism. So, Sean, how can you explain Bobby Kennedy saying, "Sorry, guy, got to pull your nomination because you're too much of a critic of vaccines"?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know Congressman Weldon well when he was served, but I mean, he was never sort of, to me, anybody that was he's a medical doctor by profession. He never had a reputation for being anything other than a very pragmatic guy, as far as I can remember. So I was sort of I'm intrigued by this one because, again, you got Bobby Kennedy at the top, and I just found it odd. The only thing that I can imagine is that maybe in the confirmation process, in the meetings, he has taken a position that he won't bend on, and they've made it clear that you won't get confirmed. But I have a hard time after you can get Bobby Kennedy through.
Yeah.
I mean, in all seriousness, and I say that because Weldon's got relationships and,
Yeah.
served, and it's a lot harder to do a former colleague. So I'm intrigued by that. I do think that the Pete Buttigieg thing is fascinating on my end. I've always believed that he is the future of the Democratic Party for a lot of reasons.
All right, we'll get that in a second. Dan, do you want to say anything about Weldon?
Just Sean's last point, I think, is key, which is historically members are pretty deferential to former members who are nominated. Like, it's a higher bar.
Yeah, but less House than Senate.
Yeah, but
yeah, and also
still.
he's been out for a while, but it's not like he was not a bomb thrower. He wasn't
Right.
a guy that, I mean, like I said, Weldon was a guy that people like got along with. I don't remember him pissing anyone off.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
yeah, he might
He's
not
a
have
House
the hardest,
member
but it's
of
not
that party that's in the majority. It's not like it's a Democratic House member from 20 years ago.
Yeah. All right. Again, I see maybe one new hand up. I saw a new hand up and then it went right back down. Please, we need 3 new people. If you're on here, you've never asked a question. Very safe, very friendly, no matter what your point of view is. And Dan and Sean will coddle and swallow you. So please raise your hand. All right, Buttigieg. There's so many ways we could approach this. Again, Politico broke the story, confirmed now by others, that he's passing on the Michigan Senate race. And Politico here, you say it's the clearest signal yet. It's the kind of thing journalists love to write. He's eyeing the presidential run in 2028. No doubt about it. Pete Buttigieg would like to one day run for president. And maybe that one day will be 2028. Be interesting to see if Kamala Harris runs, if he really does run against her. I think they are genuine friends and their spouses are friends. But let's start this way, because again, we'll tackle this from all sorts of directions. Dan, if he runs, is he clearly a first-tier candidate or maybe not?
Yes, he is. And one, he's done it once before and he did reasonably well. 2, he is authentic. He is comfortable in his own skin and he is unafraid to go talk to almost every single audience. And it's not a forced or kind of contrived thing. The other thing that I find, and this may be the most important, usually after 8, or in really Trump's case, it's going to have been 12 years of one candidate dominating the conversation, the country looks for a personality and temperament opposite of what you have currently in office. Maybe that won't be the case, but if that is so, Pete Buttigieg is the opposite of Trump. Like, he really, in so many, it's stylistically, the way he talks, he's kind of always smiling. He's not an angry kind of like in your face guy. That would set up as a real contrast, because I believe JD Vance is, whether he likes it or not, going to basically have to run for Trump's 3rd term. And so I'll be curious to see if the country kind of starts saying we want something different.
Sean, do you believe, as Dan does, that he's automatically a first-tier candidate?
Yeah, but I mean, and I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, but I do think you're grading on a curve here. I mean, I don't know that it could, I mean, in a normal 10 years ago kind of way, no. But I think that considering the current crop, he immediately rises. He can raise money. He's got a national name. He's run before. He held a cabinet position, very media friendly. And I believe this. I wrote this in my first book that, like, I believe that Pete Buttigieg will be the nominee. He has enough of the resume. He's a McKinsey guy, so he can claim business. He's got the veteran status, so he can say that. And then he's gay, and so he checks the progressive box, because you can't be a straight white dude in the current Democratic Party. So I think that, like, he is the kind of perfect thread the needle kind of guy for the Democratic Party. That's my take on this. Where their party is right now. I think he can, he's got the name. The media loves the guy. He's not been held accountable for any of his previous work requirement or position. So I think that he would do very well initially.
Oh, yeah, I think I see him a little bit differently in terms of his record and stuff, but I mean, I would not underestimate the fact that the base likes him. And we talked about, the issues Rahm would have, but the base generally likes Pete. Now, I'll be curious because Pete Buttigieg and Jared Polis may occupy a little bit of the same lane, but I also think, Pete's not tied down by office right now, and he will have the ability to get out there and try to go do some things that those sitting in state capitals or, DC can't do.
I like
and that's
him.
why I think part of the reason that's part of the reason he turned down that. Because I didn't agree. Axelrod saying he couldn't turn around and run again. I'm sorry. Didn't know a guy named Obama pretty much do that?
Pretty much. I like Pete and I respect him, and I don't diminish his strengths as you guys have outlined him. I don't think he's automatically a first-tier candidate. Obviously, it depends on who else runs. But let me ask you this way to tease out some of the doubts.
Can you explain that? Why?
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. If you were inclined to help him, Sean, and he called you and he said, Sean, I'm all in. Here, here's my finance plan. Here's my political plan, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, what are 3 things I should be worried about? Not for the general, but for the nomination. What would you tell him his vulnerabilities are for the nomination? 3 things. Dan already knows his, so I went to you first.
It's a good. I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know. I'm too common sense.
Well, I'll give you one that you should have at top of mind, which is black vote. Right? He showed extraordinary weakness last time with black voters, and we don't know
didn't he make up a lot of that at DOT? I mean, I think that's where he overcompensated at DOT.
We don't know what the calendar is going to be like in terms of what states will vote early, but there will be states that vote early with substantial black populations. So that's
but he knows that. I think that my understanding was that for the 4 years he was at DOT, he overcompensated for the failures that he had as a candidate.
He tried, but I will tell you that is a vulnerability still. So, Sean, let's go to Dan. What do you think? Dan, what are 2 others?
One is he served for Joe Biden. So, that he is going to get asked about, the Biden record, working with Joe Biden specifically. And, was he with it? And look, some of the things that happened under his watch pertaining to the Department of Transportation, he's going to have to kind of have an answer for. And then I think the last part would just be, where does he want to go, right? I mean, what would be his vision? How would he want to try to separate a little bit from the base while fixing his problem with the black vote? Like, those 3 things, I think, are where he'll have to try to, get out there and define it. But Mark, I'll ask you this. If you're a Democratic senator running in a competitive race, you're in the Michigan open Senate seat, and it's not, take Barack Obama and Bill Clinton off, what Democrat would you ask to come and campaign with you?
To raise money or to do a private event?
Either.
Probably Fetterman.
Okay. But of the 2028 candidates, I'm not sure many people move ahead of Pete Buttigieg.
Maybe. Here's what I'd add to your list, and I agree with all things on your list, Dan, about where his vulnerabilities potentially are. Here's 2 I would add. No one here can tell me what would he do as president. He's very good at talking about policy general. He's very good at criticizing Republicans. But I got no idea what the guy's vision is for the presidency. Where is he on China? Where is he on job creation? Where is he on bringing the country together? He can talk the owls down from a tree. He's incredibly articulate. And if he were near here now, he'd say to me, Mark, you've heard me say this about the economy and how to create jobs. It hadn't broken through to me. And I pay close attention. So that's one thing.
Can I just say this? And this gets back to the tier point. I don't disagree with you to some extent, but I also go, okay, tell me what Gavin Newsom stands for.
I was going to say, tell me one 2028.
Well, here's what I'd say to that. I can tell you actually what Gavin Newsom's vision is, but separate from that, Pete's had the opportunity to do it. He's run for president before, as was said. He had a huge platform where he's on TV all the time. So these other people have not had as much of a shot. They're either governors or they're people who haven't run before from Congress. So Pete's had his shot to explain to me what he'd do as president. Hasn't broken through to me. So that's number one. And the other is, got to say it, he's short and gay. Yeah. So you can say winning the nomination, being short and gay is a positive. And for some people, maybe not short, but gay is a positive. And I know for some people there is. But there is going to be a premium for the party in 2028 on winning, right? It's just like 92. There are going to be a lot of voters who are willing to swallow stuff in order to win. They'll say, I don't like this fact. if this person can win. I've looked at the list of people who've won the presidency. None of them were openly gay. 3 were gay, but none were openly gay. And so it's just a risk. And in almost every presidential race, not everyone, but in almost every presidential race in the television era, the taller person is won. The Republican nominee in 2028 will be taller than Pete Buttigieg. So
there's 2 issues here. There's, can he win the nomination and the general? And I think those are 2 separate questions.
They're absolutely separate. I'm only asking about winning the nomination. General, different thing. And there's strengths and weaknesses there too. But I'm saying it's a weakness for the nomination if you can't say to people. That's why I think a woman is going to be very difficult winning the nomination. Because voters are going to say, we're 0 for 2 with women nominees. So I think it's going to be a challenge.
So 2 things. One is, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mark, on your first point, no one really knows what any of these people would want to do. And I hear you that Pete's had more time, but what he has an opportunity to do the next 2 years is go around and do, kind of court people behind the scenes and start laying that out.
Yeah.
I mean that is part of
just to be clear, the question I was answering was, if Pete called me and said, what are the 3 things I need to do?
I get it.
Others need to do it too, but he does, and he's had more of a chance.
He does. I'm torn on whether or not, because he's gay, it would be a liability. I could see it being a liability with certain audiences. I think the question is, do you own it, or are you uncomfortable and hide from it? I know one candidate who's very uncomfortable on this topic, and their partner is even more uncomfortable. But if you are willing to kind of go right at it and own it, I actually think...
But Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but here's what you can't do no matter how much you own it. You can convince voters who care about general election electability, no problem, because there's no sample space you can point to.
Well, look, Barack Obama. We heard the same thing about a black man. Yeah, we did.
Sure, we did.
And I know people who made sure everyone knew that.
100%.
Country said it's okay.
100%. But this is a time when electability is going to be a massive issue. And by the way, let's see how Pete gets through the trans issues. Let's see how he does on that.
No, I mean, he's going to have to.
Oh, yeah. Look, I actually, look, again, don't,
but you know
financial
who could go to
advice
China on trans? A gay man.
Yes, he could. And he'd take enormous heat. He'd take enormous heat from the base. All right, we're going to go to your questions. I see some people who might be.
Just so, since we name check short people, new study out last night, life expectancy and height are inversely correlated. Studies now suggest that men under 5'8" live on average 4.95 years longer. So we may not win political races, but we're going to live longer, damn it.
Just to be clear, those of you who've asked questions in the past, it's not like you'll never get questions in again. It's just this week is new questioner week. Check your calendar. You'll see. David, have you asked a question before? You have. All right. Lance.
Just say yes.
Lance,
yes, for goodness
Lance, have you asked a question before, Lance? You have. Sue, have you asked a question before?
Oh, my goodness, folks. Say yes.
Sue has not. We're a third of the way there, folks. Welcome in, Sue.
Is Kathy Cage?
Sue, Kathy has. Welcome in, Sue from New York. Sue, unmute. Thank you for joining. Are you a longtime listener, first-time caller?
I started listening after the elections.
All right, Sue, welcome in. We'd love to have you here. Where do you live in New York?
I live in a town called Oneonta. It's a college community.
Sure.
College town, and it's south of Cooperstown.
That's right,
about 30 miles.
Raise your hand if you've been to the Baseball and Basketball Hall of Fame on the same day. I'm one of the only Americans ever to do it.
Oh.
Sue, would you acknowledge that the only reason you raised your hand was because I browbeat you with cancellation of the show and the balance?
Well, it was the nudge I was needing because I've been running
good.
For a long time.
Welcome in. We're delighted to have you here. Take as much time as you want while we wait for someone else new to raise their hand. Sue, floor is yours.
Okay, so I have 2 or 3 questions.
Yes, ma'am. Ask them all.
So I'm horrified by Zeldin's remark earlier, and I'm wondering if maybe the saving grace here could be for Democrats is that he'd be in favor of nuclear energy. What are your thoughts on that?
The administration generally is rhetorically for nuclear. Nuclear is tough because the technology constantly changes. It's very difficult to match up the latest technology with regulatory approval, which takes a long time. So I'll be curious to see if they set stuff in motion to deal with it. But it's just a challenge to be part of the mix, because even if you fast track approval, even if you work with the private sector on the latest technology, it's still quite a distance between now and when stuff comes online, which is to say nothing would come online while Trump was president. So we'll see, but they are rhetorically more pro-nuclear than previous administrations have been, at least on the margins. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Just no one
I would
wants it in the
actually be
backyard. That's
Right.
another issue.
Say again, Dan?
Nobody wants to be the member of Congress or the mayor who says, yeah, build the plant in my town. It's always build it over there. And everyone goes in a circle.
Yeah, that is a problem. All right, Sue, second question.
Well, I was just going to say, it seems like more of a long-term solution, and if he could put that out front, it would kind of shut up the environmentalists who, like myself, who are just concerned that we're just, in fact, it seems funny because it's the Environmental Protection Agency, and he's kind of turning it into, well, let's just forget about that. Let's just and I get that the Democrats went too far on one side. There's been all these mandates for things that we weren't ready for, electric cars. There wasn't the infrastructure to support them, so it has to be brought back to a more central. Yep. I don't disagree with that, but from my mind, if they were starting to push and talk about it, that would be helpful. Okay, so the other thing is, I don't think Pete Buttigieg is the answer. I think they've got to have somebody comes more in the middle. But
all right, Sue, let's run through your history. Did you vote for Barack Obama?
Hold on a sec, Mark, because Sue, you don't think he's in the middle at all then?
No, hold on. We'll get to that. Did you vote for Obama twice for the nomination?
I voted Democrat forever.
No, but for the nomination, who did you support in 2008 for the nomination? Did you support Barack Obama over Hillary Clinton?
I think I was more in favor of Hillary because I think, but I was concerned about her electability.
All right. In 16, did you support Hillary or did you support Bernie?
Not Bernie.
Not Bernie. And in 20, did you support Joe Biden?
Yeah.
I think by New York, he was the only one left.
Yeah. So tell us, sorry, as Dan asked, tell us now, do you think Pete's a centrist or not?
I don't think he's electable.
Why?
Why?
For all the reasons you brought up, he's gay. I don't think I think the Democrats need to move more, they got to find somebody who can be more in the center, who's more like less, dying on the hill for every little issue, who can take a longer view. At some point the Dems have to wake up and sort of
So besides being gay, how does Pete Buttigieg fall short of what you think they need?
He just doesn't appeal to the people in the middle. He'll still get the base. The base will, that's the trouble with our primaries in the Democratic Party. We just elect these unelectable people that appeal to the base. The base is shrinking more and more. The base no longer is a majority of the country, of the Democratic Party. So,
but don't you agree though that that's
to get enough people back to be elected?
That's the problem, though, right? That in order, I get it, but you can't become the nominee until you go through the primary, and the primary favors the folks on the left.
Yeah.
So, we're screwed.
I think Pete is as good as anybody in the party right now at appealing to both the base and the center. I really do think he is.
He's going to get
he's going to be the nominee.
Yeah.
He'll be the nominee, but he won't be the president.
All right, Sue, thank you for coming.
Go
ahead, Sue. Go ahead. I want to get you the last thing. And then I think Marianne, you're new, right? Yeah. All right, go ahead. Yes. We're 2/3 of the way there. Go ahead, Sue.
Just one last thing. I went to a lecture series locally at one of the colleges, and Antonio Delgado got up and talked, the lieutenant governor
of New York.
And I was super impressed with him. I don't see him in the next term, but he could potentially. What's the thought about him in New York City? Is he even on anybody's radar as somebody who's potentially? I don't see him running for the governor because right now he's lieutenant governor for Kathy Hochul, who's not very popular.
Well, and he said he's not going to run with her again. So it's.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So he's differentiating himself from her. So that's good. So maybe there's a chance for him. Okay.
Maybe a little bit.
But you guys
down the
like
road.
Him, right?
Down
you think
the road.
He's pretty good.
There are people ahead of him in the line, but he's an ambitious guy and he's appealing for sure.
The one thing that I'll bring out is my district 19, which he was in before he was appointed. It's very rural, extremely rural, and he still managed to win substantially.
That's right.
So I think he's got that appeal for both sides.
He does. Sue, thank you. Thank you for coming. Come back regularly. Tell people what a great experience it was. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Again, as I say, we're 2/3 of the way there because, ladies and gentlemen, here for the first time on the two-way platform, Marianne Nichols. Marianne, thank
What
you
a
for joining.
backdrop.
Nicholas, sorry, not Nichols. Nicholas. Marianne, where are you
Thanks.
calling us? Where are you calling us from?
I'm from Montana.
Yeah,
Wow.
awesome. Well, thank you for joining.
Montana.
Very grateful. How long have you been watching two-way?
Oh my gosh, several months. I heard about it from some friends, and I'm a Sean Spicer convert. Sean, I didn't think I liked you, and I think you're fabulous. So
That's what
Well, I'll
two-way
take a convert any day.
two-way basically exists to boost Sean's popularity. So we're glad.
Well,
it works.
well
Look at that.
done.
The sun
Rating.
came out
Well
behind
done.
Sean. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's not a real background behind you, of course.
it is where I live in this Southwest Montana in the valley. So no, I'm not outside
Yeah.
right now.
All right, but is that seen near your house?
Yes, it's up by we have a little ski hill up there in the
Beautiful.
Grasshopper Valley.
What's your closest airport?
But a Butte or Bozeman's about a little under 2 hours.
A little under 2 hours. And are you a native?
Almost.
Yeah.
Been here a long, long time. South
Yeah.
Dakota native, but been in Montana off and on all my life.
It's a beautiful
Yep.
place. Beautiful
It's a
place.
great place. Yeah.
I was there earlier this year, and every time I go, I'm just amazed. It's just a breathtaking. Thank you for joining. Tell us what's on your mind.
There are so many things, but you brought up education earlier. So, and this might be for Sean, but I'd be curious to know what Dan thought too. I'm frustrated with the Department of Education too, but is doing away with that. What is the administration's plan to improve education? Is it an issue? Are failing test scores? My kids are older, out of school, and I think the schools were kind of lousy, when they were in school, however many years ago that was. But is it a social issue, cultural issue for teachers that have so many problems in the classroom? I think our curriculum is terrible. I think just doing away with the Department of Education, what's the administration's plan? Is it just to make it local control? Because that concerns me. I don't think a local school board is necessarily the best determination of what a good curriculum is. So does administration have a plan for what would be the best thing going forward and what the goal is to improve our outcomes, success in schools? There's so many social issues. So that's a lot of questions.
Great. No, it's a great question. Sean, what's your sense of where the administration is planning to work on improving the most important issue for our country, as far as I'm concerned?
Well, Marianne, I think you framed it correctly. I mean, we've been spending boatloads of money, getting worse and worse results, thinking something's going to change. I mean, that education-wise, that shows you where we are. And I think that the plan is education is best left at the local and state level where it's more accountable. I mean, I get your point. You may not like your local school board, but at least they're accountable. You can probably contact them, see them. You can actually vote them out, which you can't do in DC. So I mean, the view is there's a difference between dismantling the Department of Education and not funding it. And there's two different issues here. The goal of the administration is take the resources and the funding from DC and ship it to the states to let them make decisions. You may not agree that that's the best way, or but it's at least it's more accountable. And that's what they're doing. It's to say, we keep spending more and more money at the federal level, pushing down mandates and curriculum that's not working. The test scores don't show it. So why not at least give it to people who are more accountable, more in tune with the needs of their communities, the students, et cetera, and are more responsive to the parents. So that's the goal.
Do you think there should be some national criteria though for math and history and science, so we don't get into this? As I'm not necessarily against critical race theory, but I think they should have Thomas Sowell too. So I think
Sure.
there's.
But I think there should be Thomas Sowell. There should be, I mean, yes, the answer is it shouldn't be one person or another. We should be teaching history. Who are the great individuals that have allowed the country to be what it is? Pro and con, by the way. Talk about Confederate generals. I mean,
Right.
Part of teaching history is so that people have an idea of what worked, what we don't repeat. I guess the answer I'd give you is, generally speaking, I would love like a math standard, especially in the STEM area. The problem is every time that we try to do something at that level, it backfires. And the second that we put in national standards, they end up going too far. I firmly believe that education is handled where it can be most accountable for. If your school board is screwing up, at least you can deal with it. Right now, there are people jamming standards down and curriculum down from the federal level that have zero accountability. You know, we've talked about appropriations process in the back. Try to find somebody at the Department of Education. At the best, you can get your congressman to call somebody who can maybe contact somebody who can give you a form letter. That's not accountability. And it would take, you know, a congressional oversight hearing and funding, as opposed to literally walking down the street and having a conversation with the principal. I mean, too many times when you do that, what do they tell you? We're forced to do these things. We can't get around these things. And I think that the idea of at least saying, okay, if you're forced to do them, I'd rather know that I can unelect the knucklehead in my town or my city, as opposed to trying to fight some unelected bureaucrat in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And I think we have a good local school board, just to be clear, but I don't know that they're qualified to be picking curriculum for biology and history and most of them, but anyway.
Look, I mean, I would completely disagree with Sean. Of course they're accountable. That's why you have a Secretary of Education that sets the direction of the department. I think, Marianne, what you hit on is what is becoming an increasing anxiety point in the electorate. It's not just the Department of Education. What is on the other end of DOGE? Why should people think, okay, you're cutting people, or to Sean's point, you're going to send the money to the states? Why should we think that it's going to get a better outcome? What is the new service? Why is it going to be as efficient or more efficient or service better? Look, it isn't true that test scores just collapsed for 20 straight years. There actually was some progress. In COVID, it was a disaster. No doubt. My own family, almost everyone knows of stories where kids struggled and the standards have gone down significantly in the last 4 years. But it is not, to your point, some states or local jurisdictions have very unique standards or what they want and what they don't want. And there's a reason we have a federal government. There's a reason you have state capitals. And I think that that is the question that the Trump administration has not answered. And in my opinion, they don't know. They don't know what's on. We also
by the way, we actually, if you go back to the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, all things not, enumerated here are for the states. Like, this is our system of government, right?
So should we get rid of the Department of Commerce, get rid of the Department of Energy? Because none of that stuff's in there.
No, sure there is. Actually, it talks about levying tariffs in the Constitution. It talks about
the Treasury Department.
Interstate commerce. It talks about interstate commerce. There's several things that the commerce does at the federal level. But yeah, listen, you want to talk about, and here's my bigger fundamental problem. And this goes back to the conversation we have on DOGE, which is, we keep saying, oh, we all agree that the system is broken. We all agree there's waste, and no one does a damn thing. And so if finally we go, let's try it that way, send it back to the states, because for year after year, decade after decade, we go, yeah, education standards are falling. The kids aren't learning. They're not keeping up. And everyone just passes the buck year after year. So maybe, just maybe, doing the same thing over and over again isn't the recipe for success.
No.
Well, look, it's not true that we do the same thing over and over again. And what you're proposing is a pretty radical thing, which is eliminate the department.
Yes.
Well,
but don't eliminate. But again, you're just eliminating the bureaucracy. You're still sending, and you're putting those key functions under different departments. You're sending the funding back to the states.
Well, I haven't heard them saying it's going to a different federal department. They're saying we're just getting rid of it.
Yeah, Marianne, hold on.
No. The functions, not the departments. So you're going to have key functions go under certain things.
Marianne,
the VA's got some aspects.
Marianne, thank you for setting this off. I apologize for calling you Nichols. I know that happens all the time, and
it happens all the time. I hope I helped save the show.
You did. So, well, you might have. You certainly put down a good down payment, but I apologize for getting your name wrong. Couldn't be more delighted for you to come, and please keep spreading the word about two-way. And thank you.
With you and Jim Howard, we get education questions from Montana.
Exactly.
Yeah, Jim was on the chat too, by the way.
James Henderson, are you new to the morning meeting? Raise your hand if you're new to the morning meeting.
Say yes, James.
You are new.
Yes, James.
All right, folks. I was going to use the last few minutes to just thank everybody for your support for the program, to tell you about other opportunities on two-way. But it's possible that if James is telling the truth that he's new, he says he is. James, unmute. James, yes. You got a Bible handy?
Pardon me?
I just want you to swear, James. You've never been on the morning. You've never been on the morning meeting before?
Oh, I've been on the morning meeting. I just haven't.
You haven't raised your hand before. You never spoke.
Thank you.
All right. Congratulations, everyone. The show lives another day. Of course, could die tomorrow, but congratulations. James, let's get you in quick, and then I want to get somebody who's a regular hand raiser on so we can reward those folks for their constant participation. Tell us where you are and what's on your mind.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, Illinois, in the heart of the big city, and a long time viewer going back to before the election.
We're grateful to have you, sir.
Two-way, and I think it's one of the greatest things. It's addictive.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, but one, I tried to blend them together, and it relates to this discussion earlier about the EPA and now about the education and the sort of what some people consider the extreme actions that are being taken by the Trump administration, when in fact it's a reaction to doing nothing for, if not a few years, decades in many cases. And I think that my question is, don't you think this what appears to be extreme actions can be mediated after the fact by reviewing, what is working and what isn't working? Because we know what isn't working just based on the recent comments on the education department.
Great question, Jim. Great question.
Yeah,
great question. Dan.
I think if you had to say today what may be the biggest issue in 2 years that the midterms may kind of center on, it may be Doge. It may not. But to your point, look, I hear you, and that's voters clearly with Trump voted for change. So we're getting change. Question is it too far? And that's what is going to ultimately be up to the electorate to, say yay or nay.
Sean.
Excuse me. Hold on. Pardon me.
That's all right.
I would say I agree with you, James. I think, look, for too long, it's been excuses with nothing. And so right now, some people may say, hey, the process isn't perfect. Fair enough. But I would rather, thank you, by the way, to Kenny. I would rather them do this and then correct here and there than do nothing, which has been what we've had. So I get it. It's not perfect, but I would rather do what they're doing and then have to go back and tinker with some stuff to get it back on track than keep making excuses why we can't. And that's always been the case. Let's do a study. Let's do a PowerPoint. Let's get to it next year. And nothing happens. So I'd rather autocorrect.
James, so grateful to you for coming on. Please come back regularly. Thank you for being a part of Two-Way.
Thank you.
Okay. Sam, welcome in. Not a first-time caller by any means. In fact, such a regular, you should be in the credits.
Don't I look like a fresh face?
Now you perpetually look like a fresh face.
Freshly shaven.
We're glad to have you here representing the regulars, and I assume you're very grateful that 3 of your colleagues in the part of the community saved the show. So
welcome. Thank you to all
back.
3 of you.
Welcome back, sir. What's on your mind?
What I wanted to talk about, Dan kind of put wrangled me a little bit about when he was talking about Elon's involvement with the government, because I think, you sort of parenthetically said it, which happens a lot, about how Elon's relationship with the government is very complicated, which it certainly is. But I think it would be fair and important to double click on that and figure out what it is the relationship with SpaceX and Tesla are with the government. So I wanted to bring a little bit of information there. So, I'll kind of put it out there that I've been an investor in Tesla just as a personal investor since 2013. I've been a huge Elon fan for a long time. I worked for Tesla for some time back in 2015 and 2016. So, I've been following him and his companies for a long time. The reason that SpaceX has contracts with the government is SpaceX has been able to save the federal government billions of dollars on launches, whether it's payload or crew. And I'll give you an example for a crew launch when it was still Boeing, I believe, and I believe one other contractor. To send crew to the ISS would cost about $1.3 billion. Today, with SpaceX, to send crew on the Dragon capsule costs about $300 million. And the goal at SpaceX is to drop those launches to about $10 million per launch by being able to reuse all of the rockets. So I get that you weren't just trying to malign him necessarily, but I think it's that those facts are put out there in that way to make it seem like there's just this genuine corruption, when what Elon's been doing for years is saving the taxpayer a boatload of money. And I remember around this time, there's hundreds of hours of video of Elon talking about his different companies, so it's hard to really track down, but I remember at this time he was super frustrated. And there's a 60 Minutes episode from, I want to say 2017, that talks about this. He was super frustrated with the fact that Gene Cernan, Buzz Aldrin.
Sam, hold on just 1 second. Warn our affiliates, we're going to run a little bit over. Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you. A bunch of NASA legends went to Congress to fight against having a private company do launches for, I think, legitimate reasons. But he was very disappointed. In this interview on 60 Minutes, he's almost in tears because he's saying, these are heroes of mine, and I've built my company to be able to do something good for the world. And I am just getting nothing but just terrible, so I say that to say it's important to just look into what the nature of these relationships are, and what the trend of Elon Musk's relationship with the government are. And the second thing I'll say is, when it comes to the EPA, I just find it really ironic that I don't like what Lee Zeldin said. I don't like the policies that are being put forward personally. But the irony is, the one person who's done more to advance the push towards sustainable energy sits next to the president, in a way, Elon Musk. He's done more than any individual to push us to a more sustainable energy future. So for people that are keen observers of Elon Musk and his companies, it's really confusing to see how the nature of the realignment. So
all right, Sam, thank you for that. Dan, real briefly, and then Sean.
Yeah, I'll just say, look, I hear you that he's an amazing entrepreneur. He has built amazing companies, and he has been a good contractor to the government, right, for some of his services. But to your point, he is a contractor. He wants more contracts. He competes. What if somebody's coming along who could do it for $5 million for NASA? I'm just saying, for instance. But you don't think that somebody who's controlling the purses and the personnel that are going in doesn't have a conflict of interest? If a Democrat was doing that, I think people would say, wait a second, time out. We have a concern. If you just remove Elon's success, but you have to when you're thinking of conflicts of interest, anybody else, you would say, I don't want that person necessarily having their hand on the tiller of the spending, the personnel, and regulations. He's very vocal about how much he's hated federal regulations for Tesla and for, on battery development, safety standards. He might prove to be right, but now he's in charge of it.
Sean.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Good. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I would just say I'm pro transparency. So the more that we can put out there in terms of what it is, but I love your perspective, Sam. I actually had never thought of that aspect of how much is being saved. So I think, in fact, that's more reason for more transparency because of exactly what you just shared with us. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and I don't speak for him necessarily, but I'd imagine, based on what he said in the past, if there is a contractor that comes in and saves more than what SpaceX is saving us, 70, 80, 90% per launch, I'm sure he would be okay with that. And he would have to innovate his way around getting a better price. And that, again, speaks to some of the, I think, not to give out the industry that I'm in, but I have some work with the government as a vendor. And the way these contracts are put out there, there's a lot to be really upset about.
You know what,
Sam,
guys, for both of you two, I look forward to Elon Musk disclosing everything because he won't do it.
Sam, thank you, Sam. Thanks for coming. Real quick, dip into CNBC because much to my surprise, here's
and it's been another sort of up and down ride this week. A lot of uncertainty among.
What happened? Bring that back.
Tariff on Europe on wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France and other EU countries. And I do wonder how that comes to be. Was this premeditated? Did you know about this? As this is in retaliation to what Europe did, in retaliation to the steel and aluminum tariffs, but 200%?
Look, I was with the Business Roundtable yesterday. I think it was 135 CEOs, and I talked to them about our plan, which includes tariffs, deregulation, and what I call reprivatizing the government, and bringing down this incredible level of government spending. And one or two items with one trading block, I'm not sure why that's a big deal for the markets.
All right, we jump out of this. Turn over to CNBC. You can watch the rest of it. Sean, what do you have tonight on your show?
We got a great. We do Thursdays as our panel. Everyone tonight is from the Blaze Media, so it'll be fun. And then tomorrow's Caroline Levitt.
All right. Caroline Levitt, too young to run for Senate in New Hampshire, by the way. She would not be 35 by election day, or 30 by election day.
30.
Tonight on Two-Way Tonight, Mark Caputo, the great Mark Caputo, one of our faves, a reporter for Axios, will be on. And as you know, sponsored by the Bonson Group. And we're announcing today, the second event we're doing with David, a private event, won't be on YouTube, won't be on X. You got to come on the Two-Way platform, March 17th. David and I will be talking about markets and about how you can think about where the markets are now, think about the best ways to invest and to navigate through as a news consumer and as a personal investor or for your business. So go to tway.tv/TBG to sign up for that March 17th event. That's just 4 days from now, to March 17th, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the three heroes who saved the program. And because of that, we'll all be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. I'll see you at 6. Don't forget Sean's show. And we'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Have a good day.